Hello and welcome to Awaken Your Human Design. My name is Moni, and we have a really fun show for you today. We're going to be talking about individual knowing circuitry, continuing our circuitry series, and then we're going to talk about how to read a chart in human design and just point things out because there's a lot of numbers and colors and shapes and stuff going on. So we're just going to explain that all for you. And to do that, I'm going to bring on my wonderful co-host, Danny.
Hey, Danny. And we're in.
Yeah, we're in.
Yeah, I can't wait. I did a little bit of listening beforehand just to sort of have it all refreshed, like some things, just to get some of those things that I hadn't listened to in a while. This is gonna be good.
Yeah, it's always nice going back into like core raw human design stuff and just remembering what like that foundational information is all about.
That's exactly what's going on.
Perfect. So before we dive in, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our viewers that are watching live or on the replay. Thank you for liking and subscribing. It really helps us out. So if you're getting some value from our channel, it's a really nice way to show us and just, encourage us that like you're into this and we're going to keep creating this content. So
Yeah,
let's get
pass
into
it
it, Danny.
around, right? Please pass it around. This knowledge should start to fly at some point in time. If you like it, pass it around.
Fantastic. So individual knowing circuitry, you ready to dive right on in?
Indeed.
All right. So knowing circuitry, this is about being empowered to live as oneself. So knowing circuitry, it empowers others to be an individual example of their own uniqueness, and their need is to be observed and recognized for that uniqueness. It's inspired and intuitive knowing of each moment. And it's because it's the moment by moment knowing of the spleen, as well as the passionate and melancholic moodiness of the emotional wave, which is unpredictable, creative, and unique. And it's not about mastering, perfecting, or organizing, but it's about birthing something new, totally new, and potentially transformative into the world as an individual.
Yeah, and it's that pulse we talk about so often, and it is that melancholy that's guaranteed there. It's funny, I heard this great example. We get into a touch of melancholy and people call it the end of the world sometimes, you know what I mean? They just don't
Sky
know
is
what to,
falling.
the sky's falling and you can't quite tell what it is. Well, now we can keynote for you exactly what that is, and you'll see it's creative space. It's always a creative space. Sadness becomes an incredibly creative space. And this exemplifies it. And the channels we're going to do coming up are going to exemplify it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So last week, as the first part of our knowing deep dive, we went up that center line, up the root to the throat, and then down from the head, ajnan, to the throat. So today we're going to complete the knowing circuitry. We're going to first go up the splenic side with those two channels, and then we're going to go up the solar plexus side. So ready to dive in?
I'm ready.
So here we have the channel 3828. It is the channel of struggle or the design of stubbornness. And so gate 38 is opposition or the gate of the fighter, and it's a root gate. And then gate 28 is preponderance of the great or the gate of the great game player, and it's a splenic gate. So the root is the brown square at the bottom, and then the spleen is that brown triangle off to the side. And 3828 is about the struggle to find meaning and purpose for living. And it's the capacity to find meaning and purpose within life struggles. So gate 28 brings the awareness of the struggle's appropriateness and discerning what has value, what actually is worth fighting for. And then gate 38 is the pressure to preserve individual integrity, and it's fighting against or opposed to outside forces that are distracting from the true self.
As with all individual definition, this channel is much more than any of them, with maybe one or two exceptions, says, don't try to influence me. I'm struggling for a purpose. And that in that opposition is to outside forces. It's not just to what's, stupid. It's opposition to stupidity too, for itself. It's like, that's no good for me. It will oppose. But it's opposition to just influence in general, to keep itself pure, so that if the struggle in this unique individual way gets polluted with other people's stuff, you know how that goes. Took on too many opinions of someone else. Next thing you know, you didn't follow your own self.
Mm-hmm.
This is designed to follow one's own self very much so. 28 says, not only do I fight for a purpose, but I'm willing to take risk. The more I've come to some kind of awareness that maybe life isn't fulfilling my purpose. So a lot will come out of this. And then a lot of mundane stuff will come out of this. That fighter is just so busy trying to get the one thing that will give it some kind of meaning making that they forget everything. Everything's a struggle to them. You know, what do you want to eat? Struggle. What do you think? Struggle for just to give your own opinion sometimes. And so it's a very particular way that these people will be, and we need it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like 28 in the gate of struggle, it can sound really like womp womp. Like it can sound really heavy if you have that. But yeah, it's not. I really like the line of like the gate of the great game player of like life is a game and you got to have something worth fighting for. Like you never, like you get so bored so easily if a game is too simple and you just beating it right away. You're like, I don't even want to play this because it's not challenging. You know, like if you're an athlete and you're like, an NBA or an NFL pro, you don't really want to play against the junior high varsity game, you know, because it's not challenging. It needs to have that bit of a oomph and something that you do have a dream and a dream worth fighting for. So it's really an interesting way to reframe it because I know it can, you know, some of the human design gates have some pretty intense names that can be a little off-putting. But if you dig a little deeper, you know, like humans are built to challenge and struggle. Like
Yeah.
we're literally wired for it. And if we don't have something to challenge and struggle and push against, we'll create it. Like we'll create crazy stuff to fight against that doesn't even matter if our lives are too easy.
Totally. This challenging of 38 is, I guess it's similar to all the three gates on this side of the root center, the 54, 58, and this 38. They make some kind of a challenge, you know, just like on the other side, it does some kind of a provocation. And you know, the challenge of 58, 58 isn't even necessarily challenging, although it becomes an energy to challenge in gate 18.
Mm-hmm.
But 38 is to challenge this own internal thing. I mean, look where it goes. It ends up leading into so many different definitions, right? Because 57 breaks out into three different channels.
Mm-hmm.
One of those one of those things it breaks into is centering. This is a self-centered way to follow your own meaning making and help get you to your own convictions. And it can be deaf if you've got a partner with this. They're very often they just not hearing, just not quite hearing the thing you're saying, and that means you got to wait a little bit. If these people try and cross the street and you know something's coming, you know, pull them back. But the thing is, they might be really annoyed at you for interfering with their particular struggle. You know, so just understand the struggle is the fight for the purpose that is very happy to be creative, mutative, outside of its melancholy, and not have to fight nearly as hard. That's really what it teaches us. We ultimately find, oh, we don't have to fight so hard anymore. The purpose is there. And so this is a great movement for humanity's consciousness.
Oh,
Hmm.
lovely. That really
Hmm.
ties it together nicely. Do you feel good?
Hmm.
I feel good.
I feel good.
All right, continuing on to the 5720, and this is the channel of the brainwave, and it's a design of penetrating awareness. And so gate 57 is the gentle or the gate of intuitive clarity, and it's a spleen. So that's that brown triangle again on the side. And then gate 20 is the gate of contemplation, which is the gate of now. And it's a throat gate, which is the brown square up top by where you'd imagine the throat would be. And so the channel 5720 is where intuitive insight is given its clearest voice in the now moment. And it's penetrating self-recognition of the truth of our existence. And the voice of the 5720, specifically, especially the 20, since it goes to the throat, is the I know I am alive now.
I am alive. I know I'm alive right now. Absolutely. Um, so this gate of the gentle, it is heavily influenced by the 28 below it. The 28 below it will cause this gate, which is primarily concerned with integration and centering, um, um, and the individual circuitry. It will take that and say, you can't quite be so integrative. You have to share what you know. This is a deep gate of knowing. It was our first real sturdy awareness in humanity, was this intuitive clarity in the now that helps us survive right now. Everything is right now. And it hears with such specificity. It's the gate of the right ear. And it gets up to 20. And what it hears now is either it's psyched about it and it's out doing stuff, or it's not. The sadness and the melancholy of this thing is the thing that helps boost or slow down the manifestation. Unbridled, no melancholy, this thing would literally try to manifest its way into unaware things. accidentally. You know, if there's no gate 28 to help correct it, it might do the same thing. And so this penetrating awareness, this brain wave, and I've often worked at what is this brain wave? It's this direct connection of brain to mouth in a way, except this brain is our intuitive brain, the thing that happens so fast we can't find an answer for it. And this thing cuts through the air so fast, the owner of this gate, this channel who has it, doesn't know. It can feel a little like a cat on a hot tin roof. It's like, I know this, I know that. I am now, I am now, I am now, I am now. And in a sense that you have to manifest, yet it's a projected channel. And it certainly doesn't look like one, but it is. And so this penetrating awareness is meant to keep us alive in the now. It's also meant to basically empower everyone around it. This is now what I know. This is the thing that I had a little fear on, and it became clear in a nanosecond. This is a channel that either talks a lot or not at all, depending on literally the vibration and the safety inside that room. We need this channel. It helps make integration a little bit softer because this channel is here.
That's
And
really
because
cool.
28, because of gate 28 as well.
That's neat.
Yeah.
It's neat too, because it's a so right now in the moment, both with the spleen, because the spleen is just an existential in the moment, in the moment, in the moment, in the moment, and then gate 20 is the now. So it's like the now.
Right. The only now, the first now. Right. Gate 20's voice says, I am now. It might even be shortened to just I now. Because to say I am is even an awareness. 57 is the awareness that I am. And 20 just says I am now, or it would just say I now.
I know, yeah.
I now.
Because
Essentially,
the am would be the splenic, and just
this
the I now
sorta, yeah,
would be
you
the
could
throat. If you really want to like
absolutely.
piece it out.
Yeah, because I now has got no awareness. It's just literally it's existential. And 57 has awareness beyond the existential, yet it's incredibly existential. If you've got this channel, you're always biting through into the moment with something that is absolutely right now. And it might be off-putting to others. Or it might be something you think you have to, quote, work on. You know what I mean? You don't. You need to know it, but it's part of you. This is quick. This channel's lightning fast. And that's all it
Cool.
is. In fact, it's nothing else but lightning fast. Think about it. If the second it's not lightning fast, it's sort of not, because the spleen determines
So
in the
it's either
moment,
lightning fast or it's nothing.
or it's sort of not. It's
Mhm.
it's sitting there waiting to be
To
lightning
be
fast
lightning
the
fast.
second again. Yeah, yeah. That's a good way to look at it. I would call it. No,
That's cool. I like that. I feel good. Do you feel good?
I do.
All right. So now we're going to flip back down to the root, that brown square at the bottom, and we're going to go up the solar plexus side. So the 3955 is the channel of emoting, and it's the design of moodiness. And so gate 39 is obstruction, or the gate of provocation, and that's that root center gate, that brown square at the bottom. And then gate 55 is abundance, or the gate of spirit, and it's a solar plexus gate, which is the brown triangle on the flip side of the chart. And so the 3955 is prone to melancholy and uncertainty. It's provocative and emotional, and it has that pulsing on-off wave of moods that are set into motion here. And the emotional wave underlying the passion and melancholy of individualism is mechanic, and it's an endless continuum between happiness and sadness, happiness and sadness.
It's just so important to recognize that this channel guarantees that the person that wakes up in the morning looks at the glass and the answer is it is either half full or half empty, in some slight minor kind of way, one way or another. And take that example and really mushroom it out into something bigger for your life if you have this channel in your body graph, because it guarantees an emotional wave that feels relatively steady, except to the owner of the gate, the wearer. You're wearing this gate because you got it in your chart, right? There's a there's a steady uneasiness that comes emotionally with this, because you always know you could fall down all the way down, and then suddenly your cup doesn't runneth over. And then 39, the provocateur, it is provoking. It's provoking sometimes by doing nothing. It's provoking by picking at and needling. And it's just trying to find the spirit of 55. And this spirit of 55 is the gate that's waking up as part of the phoenix. And it's an emotional, deep emotional awareness, and it'll be one of our most profound emotional awarenesses the more we get a handle on it. And to get a handle on this whole channel is to realize you're fickle. You don't know. You have no idea. And it might take a long time before you actually know. It's wicked concerned with passion and romance and that individualness that then gets up to gate 22 and 12 when we get to it. And it's got this, it doesn't have an access to the throat yet, but if it did, it would articulate caution like gate 12 does. It's its own form of the fickleness is to keep it somewhat cautious so that it doesn't go too quickly. That's why it's so important this whole stream wake up, because out of all the gates, it knows it's not supposed to move too quickly. I can't wait till everyone figures that out. Oh, let's slow down, you know,
What a
or
thought.
else they go up and down on that wave. And the thing is, it's not a roller coaster like the crash wave, and it doesn't step lively like the tribal wave, you know, ratcheting forward and backward. It spikes for no particular reason at all. They all move for no particular reason at all. Technically, they're chemistry. You know, women get this. Women menstruate. They're used to that chemistry. Yet they'll go ahead and say they'll make no big deal out of that chemistry. You never hear a woman saying, "Oh, I'm menstruating at this point. I quit my job and it's time to move to a new town." It's not. You don't say that. No
No,
woman
you
will say
just you
that.
deal with it and you wait
Yeah,
it
like
out,
because
and
they're
it'll
so
get better in
aware.
a few days.
It's very intelligent of them. It's emotionally intelligent of them to recognize this is a chemistry. Oh yeah, no, this doesn't matter. It's just it's on the move.
Hmm.
Um, give them a touch of melancholy, like I said on the other side, and it's the end of the world. It's the same, not necessarily, but I'm just saying it's the same exact thing. And the thing with it is to watch that when it spikes all the way down. Do not run to the medicine chest. It's not something you're supposed to be medicated for, or that you have an eating disorder around. Don't worry about all of this stuff. Eating disorders come out of this channel, by the way. We need to talk about that at some point when we can go in more depth. But
Yeah. There's the
don't,
correlation. Like,
there's a
just
huge,
disclaimer, we're not giving any kind of medical advice here. It's just there's a correlation with these type of issues that arise that you can see in your chart. Talk to your doctor before you change anything. Disclaimer.
it's an incredible correlation. Talk to your doctor, of course, if you have one.
Yeah.
And so if you take the sudden down of this, uh, it's fast. I sunk. And
Hmm.
if you take the sudden up of it, because it spikes, it doesn't move slowly, it sort of moves quickly. And that's these people know that, so no wonder it feels off-putting. Suddenly you're sliding, you know, and suddenly you're going up and things are really good. And the thing is, when will it stop? And suddenly you go down and you're like, when will it end? You
Hmm.
know, when will the going down end? And none of that is what you're supposed to be thinking with this channel. You recognize the fickleness, and it guarantees to ward off anyone who's not right for you. So look at it that way. This channel will it not, Moni? What do you think about that statement?
Oh no,
I
I
think
mean
it
it
will.
definitely does. Yeah, I have gate 55 without gate 39. So I could definitely tell when there's like a gate 39 around that I don't vibe with, because it just pokes. It's just
Hmm.
poking at you and poking at you, and it's like, oh, I don't stop it, stop it. Because that gate 39 is not the provocation that's correct for me. But I've been around other gate 39s that can have that like pokey provocation, but it can actually connect with my 55 in a way and provoke me into a greater spirit and realizing that abundance, it's about realizing it and recognizing it. And it is like a state of mind in a lot of ways. So it is very interesting how that 39 can be a bit pokey, and then that 55 is either like, I'm not into you and like go away, or it's like, okay, you're poking at me, but you're getting me to develop or to evolve in some way or to grow. So that's
Right.
very interesting.
And that's what it's there to do. And it's such a unique individual process. It wants to mutate the other. It is trapped in itself because it is unique and individual. So to poke at it and finally get something out of it meant you had the right key for that lock,
Hmm.
which is a very particular thing, right? So
Hmm.
me
Yeah.
likey.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was just going to kind of reiterate everything, all these gates that we're looking at that are going to be hitting the solar plexus side, whether we're doing in our circuitry or in future episode, it's recognizing that up and the down. So like Danny was saying, it's like you can be in this low place and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to be so low forever. And when will I
When
ever
will
be
it
happy
end?
again? And then on the
Right,
flip side, you're like, oh my God, I'm finally happy and it's so great. But oh no, what if I get sad again? And there
right.
can be this like nervousness, this anxiousness, this kind of fear of it. But as with any gates on the solar plexus, some more than others, but with all of them, it's like you're on a boat. There's going to be the ups, there's going to be the downs. If you're on a boat and it goes low, are you freaking out that it'll never go up again? You're like, no, you're on water. It's going to move. It's going to move up and down. So that's what Danny was like trying to get at, of like,
Yeah.
the sky isn't falling, Chicken Little. It'll be okay. You will be happy again. Like, you will feel that lightness again. Even if in that moment it can feel like you're so low and you're drowning, just trust like the wave will go up again. And when it's up, enjoy it. And yeah, eventually like the wave's going to dip again.
Settle out. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, if you can surf with it, you'll have a lot more freedom. Because I've definitely seen this with some of my emotional friends, is like, they'll get really caught up and they'll feel so low. And then by freaking out about it and getting so deep into it and so in their head and the sky is falling, it's like they make it worse for themselves. And that low will be more uncomfortable and it'll last longer because they're so tensing
And
against
yield
it.
less.
Yeah.
Very
And it's,
often it'll end up yielding more confusion that lingers into the next cycle that didn't need
yeah.
to, because this is
Yeah.
meant to clear it out.
Oh, that's
This is meant
interesting.
to clear it out. Emotional clarity comes out of this gate, out of all the solar plex gates.
Yeah. And it reminds me also, it's like if you ever have like a cramp of any kind, whether it's like an abdominal cramp or a leg cramp or something like that,
Yeah.
the automatic reaction is so often to like tense up with it and like, oh no, I don't want to feel this. And you tense with it and you're like trying to fight it. But the body needs to contract. Like, the body works by contracting and releasing, contracting and releasing. And if you fight the contraction, you actually end up making it worse. So I've actually done that where I've really practiced when I'm having some kind of cramp or pain or some uncomfortableness, where I really try to like consciously let go and just let it contract and do its thing. And instead of fighting it, and by fighting it, I'd make it twice as bad. Whereas if I can be like, cool, this is just passing through, this wave is just coming by, this is just coming through, and then it'll be lighter and easier and it passes more smoothly. So I invite, all my emotional beings, is like, I hear you. I'm sorry you're in a rough spot. And like, my heart goes out to you. And also, it's not going to last forever. And the more that you can like surf with it, the smoother it's going to go.
Take the childlike version that stays true no matter what. It's sadness and the emotional wave make you smarter. You get more intelligent and you get more capable and 10 times more resilient the more you just allow the process to happen. Because as you come out the other side, you have something called emotional clarity. And that we could do a whole episode on what is emotional clarity and have people on to talk about it, like a profile party, but just for the emotions type thing or whatever, right? And wouldn't they, if we had a round table of emotional people, would they not give us what, emotional clarity would be like those two words was worth, an hour worth of conversation, right? Easily. That emotional clarity becomes a resilience that the glass is the glass and it isn't half full or half empty. It's just your view of it. And when it's half empty, you're about to get smarter because it fills up, more resilient, more conscious, 10 times more aware. You're about to be a lot more attractive to yourself on the other side, never mind to others. And then on the other side, the glass does feel half full. Let it, it feels like it's running over. My cup runneth over. 55 gives us my cup runneth over. And I think that's pretty cool. So
That
I
is
feel good
cool.
about this.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it's like, instead of worrying about the glass being half empty or half full, just be happy that you have a glass.
Yeah, it's just a glass. And
Just a glass.
right.
Watch it rise and fall.
And by the way, you got a water jug. You can fill it up at any time.
There you
That's
go.
the point.
All right, perfect. Ready to dive into our last channel for the day?
Yep.
All right, so finally we have the 2212, which is the channel of openness and the design of a social being. And so gate 22 is grace and the gate of openness, and it's a solar plexus gate. So that's that brown triangle on the side of the chart. And then gate 12 is standstill, or the gate of caution, and it's a throat gate, which is the brown square up top. And the 2212 states that openness is dependent on the ebb and the flow of the emotional wave or the mood. And it creatively voices and acts out moodiness, melancholy, passion, romance, and drama of the individual wave. And the quality of restraint of the 12 governs the openness of the 22. And it's limiting it to social interactions with people with mutative potential.
And people that are worth listening to, and people that the articulation feels like I feel like doing it, and that speaks to gate 12's voice, which says, I know I can try if I'm in the mood. And it's a manifesting channel. There's only 3 manifesting channels. This is one of them, that are just the channel itself is a manifesting channel. So it says the manifestation of what is it we're going to end up talking about, and the manifestation of romance and this personal relationship, aspect to this is meant to be manifested through the act of living out incredible uniqueness and going through a fickle process. Don't just come strolling in. It's not you stroll in all you want, but it's not going to work until a long, drawn out, fickle process takes place. And I mean, 12 says caution, right? Gate 12 is just straight up caution, and it's cautious about all the action that's below it. That's a lot going on down there. I see you're listening to me, you little temptress, but if I let you listen for too long, I might have to love you back. You know what I mean? I might have to do some of this stuff. And then the emotional chemistry comes in, and the emotional solar plex is the source of all this incredible clarity over bonding and pleasure and food and all kinds of stuff that's pleasurable to us. And gate 12 wants that as soon as it's being offered right. It can't withstand 22 after a little while. It can try and say, I'm not in the mood all at once, but it won't stay there. So that caution is incredibly important. And the whole channel itself, I mean, look at on either side of this stream of awareness, this individual stream of awareness. We'll talk about the streams another time, because we got to go through the 3 awareness centers at some point just by themselves, because so
It's
much
coming.
happens here. Yeah. And so much happens here, and we're talking sort of right through it. But this whole stream itself, the gates on either end, 12 says caution and 38 says provocation. So one's trying to get it going, and the other one's like, whoa, 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 hold on a minute. And in the center is the emotional wave saying, hey, we got some juice to go here. Don't hold us back too far. And 12 ultimately will open up, just like gate 6 will open up to the intimacy and say, yes, I can. That's the power of its voice. Gate 12 can articulate, yes, I can. I'm totally in the mood, and I know I can, because everything on the individual circuitry is I know or not. I know I provoke you. I know I'm here. I know I'm listening. And 12 is I know I can if I feel like it, period. Um, I know I can have the passion to fall in love with what is it I'm hearing from you, given that we're not fickle at each other enough to push each other away. And the rest is a tease and a ton of fun. That's what the stream says when it's working right in the people who would wear this in their costume. Yep.
That's neat. And it's neat to consider it and just kind of remember of like, okay, this is the 1222 is an individual expression of the emotional experience.
Yeah.
And that makes sense that like the 22 is going on that wave, that up and that down and that up and that down. And then the 12, like you said, is like, hey, 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 let's wait. Let's not just shoot something out of this individual wave because it might not be appropriate because you might be in a weird place in your mood. So it
Right.
makes sense that 12 is that caution that's like, hang on, maybe let's temper not speaking because we might be in a
Right.
weird place. And if I'm in a weird place and I just say some stuff, ooh, that might get me in trouble. I might
Right.
regret that later. So it makes
Right.
sense that the 12 has that caution, standstill, that like pause button.
And its concern isn't for will it look silly in the whole group. Its concern is will I look silly to the people I'm intimate with, especially the one I came with. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because the design of a social being, it already knows it can be social in a group. That's easy. Nothing personal about that in a way, right? You don't have to take it too serious. Its real socialness is in the socialness with one, with the other, or with a couple other small settings, and especially settings of two, you know, one, a partnership of some sort. That's where it's really this grace is something powerful. I love how this is. 22 is part of rulership. So the whole emotional process is meant to manifest a type of new, awake, nine-centered, graceful rulership that does get fickle a little bit, but is willing to provoke the next wave of what we think might be new. And please let me mutate you and bring it new. It's new. It's coming. 1, 2, 3, go. So that's this whole stream, and that's this final channel of openness, this design of a social being, or not.
Or not.
There's always or not, design of social being or not, antisocial, totally. This channel will be like, I'm not social right now, I'm the opposite. Well, that would be true in that moment. So
Cool. You feel good? I feel good.
I feel pretty good.
All right, fantastic. So that actually completes our deep dive into the knowing circuitry, which is pretty exciting. And so we'll finish that off. And next week, we'll be diving into our tribal circuitry. But for the rest of today's episode, first, I'm going to pop off here and Danny's going to have a little message for you. And then in a couple minutes, we'll dive back in for the second half of this episode, which is just going to be going over how to read a human design chart. There's a lot of funny stuff on there. There's a lot of numbers and symbols and shapes and colors, and we're just going to point some stuff out. We've had a couple of people in the comments asking like, oh, how do I know what my profile is? How do I know what my incarnation cross is? And it gets really funny trying to like type that out. So we just made a presentation that we'll go over. So perfect. So Danny, you ready to speak about what you want to speak about?
Yeah, it's always the same thing. So we put up some things here. There's my Instagram handle, and I have an email address on there. I'm inviting anyone who wants to have their chart read with, an expert in-depth type of analysis to get into anything you want. I became book smart in human design a long time ago, and now it's just in every fiber of my body. So if you let me read for you, what'll happen is we'll get to the bottom of strategy, authority. If you're emotional, what does that mean? If you have kids, what are they up to? We'll put it in such a way that you'll start to understand that this is the owner's manual that end up being the owner's manual and the guide for what we end up doing. And the quicker you start seeing it, the quicker you start to realize it's not hocus pocus, it's just mechanics. It's something that is in the ways of whom we are. And if you've got a partnership, I love those, especially if you're getting along. It's really healthy. And if there's any kind of friction that you're not sure what to do, I've helped save more couples than I can shake a stick at. Better than a marriage counselor, no matter what kind of. I'm glad I'm by myself. Moni can't put a disclaimer on that right now, so I'll go ahead and say it. And so better than that, better than anything I've seen, actually get people back together in a way that's substantive, that they start to see, oh my God, it didn't really matter that much. And frankly, that's not what I want to care about, is what you end up finding out. The things you think are a hang up mostly aren't. And it's not because I convinced you they're not. It's because you convinced you're not. Once I read into your chart and you just see it for yourself, it becomes apparent on the face of it, I guess would be the way I'd say it. So bring yourself in for an in-depth analysis. It's the best. Moni will tell you, in-depth analysis is yummy, and it doesn't stop at an hour. It stops at, and it doesn't even stop at 2 hours necessarily. I mean, we'll go a full 2. So, yeah.
Perfect. All right, fantastic.
Did you hear any of that?
I heard a little bit. I jumped in right at the end. Moni's not here to give a disclaimer.
Oh, shoot.
What did you say?
Oh, you heard that. I was hoping you wouldn't hear that. You might miss it.
I caught you. I caught you now.
Damn. Well, I told on myself too.
It works out. So here for the second half of tonight's episode, we're going to be diving into how to read a human design chart. And so this is going to be mostly just pointing out what is going on in a chart. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So it's not going to be a ton of interpretation, a little bit, but it's mostly just, I remember what it's like when you first get your human design chart and you're just like, what is going on? There's so much here. There's numbers, there's little tunnels and channels, and the colors are different and there's shapes. And I remember how confusing that can be. So we just wanted to dive in and explain that a little bit.
Absolutely. Clear up some of the easy things.
Perfect.
First.
Yeah. So before that, once again, thank you to everyone who's watching and hanging out with us. Thank you for liking and subscribing. It really helps us. And I'm ready to dive in if you are.
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So here we're going to have an example of a chart. As you see it, it's my chart because I'm familiar with it. So I figured, why not? So starting off, we're just going to explain on the left side, you have the red side, right? It's the design side. It's also called the unconscious. And it's something that it shows up in your chart. You might not necessarily be aware of it, but other people can recognize it in you. And so these numbers, this information is determined 88 degrees or 3 months before birth. So if you imagine like a circle and a 360, half of a circle is 180, half of that, a quarter of a circle, is 90 degrees. So it's a little bit less than a 90-degree angle. It's an 88-degree angle that's determined of where the planets are 3 months before your birth. And this side tells you about the body. It's about the vehicle. It's about the physical, right? I even think like red, like blood, right? Like it's what is animating the underneath. And this is about form consciousness. This is about the consciousness of the body, even if you're not consciously aware of it, which is kind of funny.
Right, and it's meant to be relatively unconditioned because it stays pristine. It has nothing to do with the personality, and it's meant to be you're unaware of it. You come to this is the stuff you know when you look at it. You're like, oh yeah, but yeah, you had to think about it for a minute, and it's stuff you become aware of. That's just a nice, easy one. And the stuff that happens in this red stuff, it's the stuff that just sort of shows up on the scene. It's not that you see it coming, it's that it shows up.
Perfect. And then on the flip side, you will see the black numbers. And so this refers to the personality, and it's what you're going to be more conscious of. You're like, oh, cool. Yeah, that's me. And so this is determined by the planetary locations at your birth. And this is about the mind or the passenger, right? So if the red side is about the body and the vehicle, the black side is the mind or the passenger, and it's who you think you are.
Yeah, I love that who you think you are, because when you start to get into your design, you realize this personality has been thinking it's the whole show. And it runs into its design, which is separate. It's separate and different. These are two separate calculations, right? They're 3 months apart, so everything's in a different place. Everything's different from one side to the other. And yet the black stuff thinks it's all there is. And that's why it runs into a problem, not recognizing that it's part of a greater whole. And to blow everyone's mind, what ends up being a dual consciousness. We're a binary consciousness, living, breathing, functioning, and we can now start to see that. So who I think I am, as you start to realize there's another half to you, it's who you thought you were, just becomes who I think I am. And pretty soon it just becomes who I am. So you go through this process, and it happens when you start deconditioning.
Perfect. And then here we just have both sides together, especially if somebody wants to like take a screen grab and like have it all in one. But you can see the left side, it's that design, it's that unconscious. I think of blood, right? Like you have it, it's under your skin. You don't see the blood, but you see the effect of it, right? Like, oh, look, there's like a pinkish hue. It's not like blue and, you know.
Participate with the blood running through your body primarily, right?
Yeah, so that's like how I kind of think of it. And then the black side, you got the personality, you got the mind. So,
and you participate with that for sure.
absolutely. Then moving on, if you look at the body graph, there's 9 centers, 64 gates, and 36 channels. So we're going to start off with the 64 gates. And so the 64 gates originate with the Chinese I Ching. We have a really fun series coming up that I've been working on. We're going to deep dive into the I Ching. So don't worry about learning too much about it now. Just know those 64 gates originate with the I Ching, and we'll go deeper later. And so the 64 gates, it's the number before the decimal on either side. So if you're looking at the left side, it's that 10, it's the 15, the 55. On the right side, you have the 25, the 46, the 24, etc. So gates are the bigger numbers, 1 through 64, that are before the decimals. And then they're also the numbers on the centers that show potential activation. So here we have the throat center highlighted. And so that 62, the 23, the 56, any of those on that center, as well as any of the centers. This is where the gates show up. Exactly. So
it's important to notice that in the centers and the gates, they stay the same, just in case anybody has a question. They stay the same. So they're always the same numbers in each center. That's what gives a nice fixedness to the body graph that we can now apply to everyone else.
Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up, because I know people wonder that.
I've had that before, yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen that a lot, where people are like, wait, are yours in a different place than mine? No, when you're looking at that body graph on these centers, those numbers are all in the same places, and then it varies person to person where it's lit up.
And not that you really are going to need this. Are you going into hexagrams at all?
No, that's future.
All right, cool. Then I'll leave it alone.
Yeah. So here we have what is called a hanging gate, and that's where you have the gate, but it's one side that's unconnected. So we have it circled at the bottom where you can see the 27, the 54, the 38, the 58. Any of those are hanging gates where it's like you have the one side reaching out, but it's not connected to the other side. And so you can have hanging gates on a undefined center, like we have over here on the root center. They're just hanging
They,
off of there.
they get called dormant because they're on an open center. That's actually the name for them. They're hanging gates. They become dormant because they're in an open center,
Oh,
meaning
that's a
they're awake intermittently, right? Your open center gates aren't always there pounding away at your life. They're intermittent, so we call that dormant. Ra called it dormant in his first class.
Thank you for bringing that up because it's definitely like I've heard that term, but it's
Yep.
not something I've gotten used to using all the time. So yeah,
Yep.
it's a dormant gate when it is a hanging gate on an undefined center. And then you can also have hanging gates on defined centers. So here you can see it off of the identity center, that 15, that 2, that 46, even the 10. Those are hanging gates on a defined center.
Mm.
And then when a center is defined by a channel, it's two gates are connected that form a channel. So the 25 meets with that 51 and they're connected, and then it lights up both centers, it colors them in. And so you can see it's defining two centers. So when two gates meet up, they make a channel and then it defines the centers and now they're colored in.
And it's important to recognize that when the channel gets formed, it does two things. It doesn't matter if it's formed by a red gate and a black gate, or two reds or two blacks, or vice versa. It just doesn't matter. It's about it being formed. A, and B, when it is formed, now that's a reliable life force. You call this a life force in your body because you can dang well guarantee this is a huge driving force in your body. You'll always be that thing. The thing that we can then describe out of this channel or out of any channels that you have are a life force.
I love your little like extra touches.
You
It's
got to
so
have it.
it's perfect. Yeah. That's where you get your definition.
Yeah,
So
and it's important to just recognize all that. So it doesn't matter what's hanging or what's defined. What matters is that you recognize the things that they are.
precisely. And so an undefined center is when it's white. So all the ones circled up here, the head, the ajna, the throat, all the white centers, they're undefined. Anything white in your chart is undefined. And
Mhm. Oh yeah, I'll go on to say something about this, and it doesn't matter if there's gates in it or not. It just means totally undefined, meaning totally open, or undefined with hanging gates, which means that center will have a few themes we'll talk to, just to help those people who are looking at this graph wondering what's going to be next when they learn to read charts and stuff. So, but open is open. An open center is an open center.
yeah, and just to further clarify that, because there's often times where people like the difference between undefined and open, and they're kind of used interchangeably. Undefined and open are kind of used interchangeably, and then completely open. So if you look on this example, the head, the white triangle that's pointing up at the very tip top, that
No
is
activations.
completely open. There's nothing, all three of those gates are just like open and ready to receive. Whereas the downward pointing triangle, the ajna, that has three hanging gates. So they're all undefined. It's just when there's something hanging off of it, it'll be undefined, it'll be open, and then completely open is when it's just the white shape and no little tendrils, no gates hanging off of it, like the head or the throat center in this example.
Yep, completely open. A fine distinction gets drawn at a later time regarding them, but now you know these are open centers. They're not broken. They're open.
Yeah, they're just receiving.
Yeah.
So, and then a defined center is when it's colored in. So the yellow identity center and that red will ego center, they're defined, so they're colored in. So when anything's colored in the chart, whether it's a gate, a channel, or a center, it's defined.
Yeah, that definition is important because everyone's like, I don't have a lot of color. I have more color. I have less color. It doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter. All charts are perfect. But the only way to get a center colored in is to have a definition or a life force between it and another center.
Yeah,
So a life force can only exist between two centers, not within one center. That's so rule. And only a life force can create a defined center, a center that is now defined and always active.
perfect. And the 9 centers evolved from the 7 chakras in 1781, just as like a side note. We do have a future episode. We're going to go into it from the 5-centered Neanderthals into the 7-centered humans into the 9-centered transitory species that we are. But I just wanted to bring that up of why are there 9? I've heard of the chakra system. What is that connection? So basically, we just evolved from 7 to 9 in 1781.
It's worth looking at one thing when we talk about the chakras. This is the only slide on chakras mostly?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, so look right up the center of the chart. It looks like the old 7-center chakra system.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important point to make because really the old 7-center was like a stick.
Mm-hmm.
It was phallic-y, just on purpose, take
Mm-hmm.
it that way. And it's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But we grew wings. We expanded, a lot less phallic-y. I mean, this is the yin and the yang, realizing time to, be both instead of one or the other. And so a pulling apart took place. So that whole heart center and the 7 centers sort of became 2 things. And that spleen and stuff it pulled apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave us a much greater. So basically, the 9-centered was the 7-centered. It's not like a brand new form in a way that like we threw out every last aspect of whatever the 7 centers were, and now we're 9 brand new centers. No, we're 2 new centers making something completely different, right? But it still encompasses the old 7 centers and it changed them. So we are different, incredibly different.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm.
So just to point out the centers, first up top, the white triangle pointing upward is the head center. It's about inspiration and asking questions. Then the white triangle pointing downward is the ajna, and it's receiving those questions and it's like processing a mental answer.
Awareness.
An awareness center, thank you. And then the throat center is the white square, and that's about expression into the world. It's about the creation, the manifestation into the physical. Then we have the identity, or it's also called the G center, and that's the yellow diamond right in the center, and that's about love and direction. Then we have the spleen, which is the white triangle on the left side. This is about health and wellness and timing. And then we have the will, or it's also called the ego or the heart center. That's that red triangle, and that's about worth and it's the will and self-worth and like putting yourself and putting your heart into the world. Then we have the sacral, which is the white square towards the middle bottom, and that is life force creation. That is your generators and your manifesting generators. That's their energy. And then you have the solar plexus, which is the white triangle on the right side. And the solar plexus that's your emotional wave. That's the ups and the downs and finding that emotional clarity.
Awareness in an emotional wave. It's just really cool. We'll talk about it more.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And then we have the root center, which is the white square at the bottom. And that's the adrenaline, that's the pulse, that's the starting something new, go energy. And so then we have the motors. And so motors in the chart, it's those 4 that are circled in that little purple highlighter. And that's the will center, ego, heart center, the sacral, the solar plexus, and the root center.
Yeah, these motors, they obviously move us, and you don't need a motor to move, just FYI. Motor isn't good or bad. It's just one of the aspects that we apply to the various aspects, as we're reading your chart. Yep.
Absolutely. So now we're just going to touch on type for a little bit. And type is, it's the configuration of the defined centers that determines type. That's where you get your manifestor, your generator, manifesting generator, projector, and reflector. So we're just going to go over those briefly. And so first up, we have our manifestor. And so a manifestor chart, you can identify that because the sacral, which is that square, the second square from the bottom, the sacral is undefined. It'll be white, right? And there's also a motor to the throat. So it's that combination of the undefined sacral and the motor to the throat, which makes a manifestor.
Yep. On that, and there, or do we go in? No, we don't go into aura right now. We did
No,
that
we did that last week.
Oh,
That already exists.
Yep.
Yeah. This is just the basics of
yeah, to be able to look at the chart and recognize the type just from diagnosing a chart. Yeah, this is important skill for everyone to know. Absolutely. And it's easy.
Yeah, it's an easy thing, but it's the sacral's undefined and there's a motor to the throat. Those are the 3 very specific manifestor channels. You could also, if you have the root up to the spleen to the throat, that could also create like another form of the manifester?
Any direct connection that you can draw a line from a motor to the throat, even if it like goes like the ego goes through the will, goes through the G
Identity.
center.
Yeah,
Yeah, that will still be a manifester, period. It's a motor to the throat directly connected through a direct line and no sacral.
precisely.
Yeah.
So then we have the generator, the pure generator. And so the pure generator, the sacral is defined. So that square, that second square from the bottom, it's colored in red. So the sacral is defined and there's no motor to the throat for the pure generator. It's the red sacral defined, and then the motor is not making it to the throat in any way.
Yep. A third of the population is this.
Absolutely. And
Yep.
then the specifying it with the manifesting generator, because that one's a little different. So it has the sacral defined like the pure generator, the sacral being that red square, the second from the bottom, but then it also has a motor connection to the throat.
Yeah, it's really important. And what you're seeing in this connection to the throat is the classic manifesting generator channel of 3420. But any type of direct connection of a motor to a throat, if the sacral is defined, now you've got a generator. And just to be really clear, if the sacral's defined, your generator doesn't matter, manifesting or pure generator, emotional generator or not, a generator is a generator, and you get in touch with that strategy and authority, and you'll start to see why is it God decide to put so many of us on this planet.
We need someone to be building and
Yeah,
creating
somebody
the world.
keep going. Yeah, right. It's so funny. I love it.
Absolutely.
I
So
accept.
that's your generator and your manifesting generator. And then next up, we have the projector. So to see in a chart, a projector, the sacral is undefined. So that square, that second square from the bottom is undefined. It's white, and there's no motor to the throat. And so there's a lot of variety in the types of projectors. It's the most varied of the types and the configurations that you can have.
Totally.
So it's pretty
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah, totally. It can be anything. There's so many different ones. And that's the thing. There's also a bunch of different authorities with the projector. And the projector is the most nuanced one. And it's got the most sophisticated strategy, as far as I can tell. And never mind the authority part of it. So can't wait to, we'll get into that more when we read for projectors. But notice how busy it is, too. Projected channels are the most numerous, right? So,
Yeah. And then finally, we have our reflectors where there's no defined center. So they have all hanging gates, but all the centers are white.
there's not much to say. There's the hanging gates everywhere. They'll still have the same amount of activations. They'll still have the same. They'll still have an incarnation cross, a set of nodes. They'll still have drives and focuses in their moons and truths in their Plutos. It's just that they get to go through the whole process of being lit up by the moon. And the one thing to point out about this is, so A, you got to have no definition. There is no definition. So no one life force. And B, they are a lunar being, and the rest of us are solar beings. Not that we're any different in our blood type per se. I'm just saying we do follow the sun as it relates to reading our chart. And when you read a reflector chart, you have to follow that lunar cycle to get them to fully understand what's the scoop. And by the way, you'll never meet a reflector that you can't say to them, hey, you've been following the moon since you were a kid. You got any special relationship you care to share? And they all have an answer to that. Or they've been living under a rock, but they all have an answer. They all have an answer to
Yeah,
that.
there's a connection there. Just a different vibe between, the solar
Yeah,
beings and the lunar beings. We're all humans, delightfully so, just a different kind of
yeah,
vibe, in our
yep,
unique snowflakeness. So,
absolutely.
yeah. So moving forward, we're just going to go over the planets because I know a lot of times, like, you can just look at this and you're like, what are these little symbols and glyphs there? It can be really confusing. And so we're just going to go from the top down to just show you what those little symbols are. So starting off with the sun, it's the circle with the little dot in it. So pretty simple. It's the sun. And just as like the brief explanation, the sun is what you are here to shine into the world. This is the, majority of your energy that shows through. Then
It's on both sides too. So just recognize the planets repeat on the right and the left-hand side.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
going
a
to be
direct repeat. So it's just, and by the way, look at it this way. It's a genetic science. And if you look at this and you zipper these two things up, you come up with a double helix. That is the right amount of chromosomes for our human form.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That was a cool side note. Yeah, so the planets are exactly, they're the same on both sides. They're just different times of their calculation.
Yep.
That's the sun. Then the earth is a circle with a little cross in it. And so the earth is what grounds us.
The sun grounds into that earth, and it's just so much fun to read these things, especially when then you get to the moon and the nodes.
Yeah. So going on to the moon is a crescent moon. It's a really easy shape to guess which one it is. It looks like a moon. And so the moon is like what drives us. I've started to see it as our guiding light, right? It's like if you ever go camping and you realize like how dark it really is without electricity, like it makes sense that you'd have a fondness and a relationship with the moon because that's the only light that's coming through. And so the moon is kind of your guiding light that's going to drive you.
It becomes the focus of a drive in your life. If we just read the two moons in this being, we would see how their drive works. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then we have the north node. And so the north node looks like a horseshoe that's like pointing upwards. And then the south node is a horseshoe that's pointing down. And that's how I remember which one is this, the north and the south. It's pointing either north or south. And so the nodes, they represent your kind of environment, right? If life is a great stage play, then the nodes are the set dressing, it's the characters you meet. And so the south node is kind of your environment and your trajectory and that road you're on from 0 to about 40-ish.
Yeah.
And then it switches to the north node right around 40, 42-ish, where it's like now you're on this different road.
It comes essentially at the Uranus opposition. When the Uranus has run around to come around again, when Uranus is halfway through its cycle opposition on the opposite side of where you started,
Yeah.
you shift into this north node, and your life starts to take on a different trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to even further clarify that. So Uranus, the orbit is 84 years. And so when it is 180 degrees of that 360-degree orbit of a circle, when it's halfway through, it's around 42 years old.
Yep.
And that is the Uranus opposition. And that's when you switch from your south node to your north node.
Yep.
And then moving on, you have Mercury. And so Mercury is a funny little shape. It's like a circle with a cross underneath, and it almost looks like two little horns. And so Mercury is about communication and like what you're here to communicate in the world.
And it will communicate. You look at Mercury and you put the word communication in front of that sentence, and you will be able to read something about that person by looking up that gate and knowing what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's guaranteed again. It'll show up in them. They'll know. And if it's a red one, they'll know. They'll be like, yeah, I guess that is me. And if it's a black one, they'll be like, yeah, I know. Because they'll have access to that.
Absolutely. And then we have Venus, which is the circle with the cross underneath. This is commonly the symbol for the female or the feminine. And so Venus is about what you value. It's about what's important to you. It's about what you see as beautiful and your aesthetics.
Yeah, and it becomes this what was the word we came up with yesterday? It was other than moral. It becomes part of the morals and the virtues and
And
the
the principles of Jupiter.
Well, but this one becomes part of the morals and what's the word we had yesterday? It wasn't just morals, but it becomes
Principles.
part of moral fiber and the principles and the way in which the things that are going to become important to you later.
Mm-hmm.
This helps establish that.
Yeah, this is like what you're valuing that's eventually going to turn into like a principle or more of like a hard and fast like law or a belief for you. So this is like the early steps of that.
Yep.
Then we have Mars, which is a circle with the arrow going off of the side. This is commonly the symbol for the male, for the masculine. And Mars is about like immature action.
Yeah, I love it too. It's if wherever your gates and your Marses are, don't expect those to be the spot where you're Mr. or Mrs. Mature. That's all. This is there to have a youthful type of energy. They call Mars also the god of war. Sure, technically speaking, a 12-year-old might,
The 12-year-old boy with like a slingshot.
With the slingshots and stuff, or the stick sharpened on both ends, if you know that reference, from Lord of the Flies. So they can be, a 12-year-old boy can be cruel as hell, but accidentally, it's not their favorite state. But I'm just saying, it's immature.
Yeah, before they figure out their stuff.
Yep.
So then we have Jupiter, which kind of looks like a fancy 4 is how I remember that one. It's like a
Yeah.
curly-Q version of a 4. And so this is Jupiter, it's growth, it's expansion, and it's also the principles, right? So Venus is like what you valued, and then it kind of forms into your principles and kind of like your laws of Jupiter. And then Jupiter helps you grow and expand.
Yeah, and it does. It helps cement in that thing that sort of becomes law-like, I would say. And it takes those values and it concretizes them into something that you can, I guess, live with and share with the other too.
Absolutely. Then we have Saturn, and Saturn kind of looks like an eccentric H, like a little like lowercase h that like has some little extra
A
flair on it.
stuck-up H.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like a stuck-up H. Absolutely, that's a great description. And so Saturn is it's the teacher, it's the disciplinarian, right? Saturn is going to show up to make sure you're following your syllabus. And if you're following your syllabus, cool, you're not going to be punished. But if you're not, if you're halfway, it's a midterms and you haven't been paying attention, you haven't been showing up to class, like your teacher is going to be pretty mad at you and you might hear some words about it.
Right. And Saturn will step in. The thing is, Saturn isn't something you see it, you understand it, but it's not something to run around and necessarily work with. It's something to respect because
Mm-hmm.
this energy is guiding in your life. It'll be moving with you in the rest of your design. And it will also pull you into a trap if you are living out your not self too much. You will see it will become the source of that which sucked later, until you wake up to your nature. Yeah.
Absolutely. And just to mention it, Saturn also comes through. So the orbit of Saturn is like 29 and a half years, so just about 30. And so your Saturn return is when Saturn returns to where it was when you were born. So basically, at the end of your 20s, life kind of gets a little crazy. Things kind of get shaken up a bit. Maybe like a job is lost, a relationship is lost, parents get divorced, health issues can come up. So Saturn kind of comes around right at the end of your 20s as well as the end of your 50s. And so Saturn is kind of like, hey, like the first 30 years, it's like figure out your being, figure out your body. And then like you start getting to the end of your 20s and it's like, cool, it's time to be an adult now. Who are you as an adult? And you really step into that into your 30s. So if you're in your like late 20s and you're nervous about this, or maybe you're in the middle of your Saturn return, like I feel you, I love you, it gets better. Give it a couple years, just roll with it, be gentle with yourself. Like you'll start coming out of it around like 31-ish, where like you're like, okay, I think the aftershocks are starting to let up and you really step into yourself and you're like 32 and into 33, you're like, yeah, I got this. So I just wanted to mention that. And then, yeah, at the end of your 50s, it kind of comes through as like, okay, who are you going to be as like an older person? And you're kind of transitioning as you're then like getting into your 60s.
Yep.
So then we have Uranus. And so Uranus, I've seen like two different little symbols with it. So I was like, I'm just going to include both. So the first one is a circle with a dot in it and then an arrow pointing up. And then the other one's like a really funny looking one where it's like a line with the circle underneath between like two parentheses. And so
this is that symbol is a Klingon and or a Romulan bird of prey from Star Trek. That's how anyone over 35 could choose to remember that, or over 40 could choose to remember that.
That's
how I remember it. Yep.
That's great. Yeah, that's always the one where I was like, which is that one? That's the weird one. Oh, that's Uranus. And yeah, Uranus is about like it's the unexpected. It's the crazy stuff that happens that you don't expect, but it kind of knocks you around because you need to get knocked around into something new.
Well, it becomes unusualness. And it's really only crazy when you demand other people accept your unusualness rather than you just be your unusualness and not worry about it. It's things that you're going to be unusual about in your own way. And they're things that you could also get a hang up on if you're trying to be normal. So, by the way, if you're trying to be normal after watching this show as long as you have, then like you were sleeping maybe or something, but this one helps exemplify that you're unusual, you're weird, a little bit strange right here. Oh, look, it's that way on yours. You're right. It's the circle with a dot in the middle. Looks like the sun but with an arrow pointing up.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, because this chart is from my body graph, but there's also like genetic matrix, I think uses like the parentheses and the line and the circle underneath. So you might see it either. But if there's ever like one where you're like, that's the weird one, I don't know what it is, it's probably Uranus.
Mona, you have gate 10 4
4
times in your
times.
body graph. Wow.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yep. It's a fun one.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's Uranus. Then we'll move on to Neptune. Neptune looks like a trident, right? Like if you're imagining like the mythological god Neptune and his trident, that's basically what it is. It's like the U with the line underneath and the little cross. And so Neptune is like the unseen. It's behind the veil. It's kind of that spiritual. It's ethereal. And with Neptune, it's like don't go looking behind the curtain too much, and you'll be fine.
Well, you can't see behind there,
Yeah,
even if
but
you
don't
think you're
don't
seeing.
go peering trying to understand like the magician's
Right.
tricks behind the curtain.
That's the point. It's veiled. This
Yeah.
brings a veil over, and so what it says is there's stuff we're supposed to remain veiled. So all that folklore about, leave some of the mystery so that there's, this is that. But you're right. If you become obsessed with whatever gates you have in this planet, you'll go mad
Yeah.
ultimately, because they stay veiled. They stay in a type of veiling. Yeah.
Yeah. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain when it's Neptune.
Naked or not.
Yeah.
Right.
And then finally, we have Pluto, which just looks like a P with a line underneath it. And Pluto is about transformation. It's about life and death and rebirth and just kind of shaking things up and transforming things in that kind of like fertilizer kind of way.
And you can give it a very simple, it's this overarching long-term truth. You can look at your Plutos and tell yourself that's true. And look at that and see that way, so you can start to not fall off of your own truth. You'll have truth in every other gate and every other line. Your type will tell you your truth, your strategy and authority, all these things tell you your truth. And Pluto absolutely tells you the truth, like grandma. Mom and dad might not talk about the birds and the bees, but you go ask grandma and you'll be like mortified. They do what?
So
They
blunt.
did what? Because grandma's a little older, Grandma Pluto.
Yeah, grandma's seen some stuff.
Seen some stuff.
So yeah, that's
So
just our planetary breakdown just to explain the symbols and like a brief little explanation on them. We will have a future episode coming up on the planets. I have a ton of future episodes. So when I say that, I do mean it. I have like probably over 50 presentations that I've been developing. So
it's
they're
true.
they're coming. Yeah. So
Mhm.
future deep dive on the planets, but this is just like a brief little overview. And then we're going to briefly go over these 6 lines. And so lines are the number after the gate decimal. So in this example, the 10 is the gate, and then that decimal 5, the 5 is the line. So the 1 through 6 that's after the decimal on either side, those are lines.
Yeah, it's just because the I Ching and the hexagrams and all the things we use, they have 6 lines per, and each one has a very particular value and meaning that we read to, so we need to keep track of it. So the dot whatever is just the line, and they
Absolutely.
change. They're the changing lines. If you look across the I Ching and you squint your eyes a little bit, it looks like squiggly changing lines. The
Mhm.
changing lines, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So then we can look at the profile line. So what's your profile? You'll kind of hear that. And there's like 2 numbers that are usually going to be written down on the side of the chart with all like your core information. So profile lines, you determine those by the sun and the earth on either side. And you read it from the right to the left. So it's like opposite land. You're reading it personality and then design. And so for our example here, it's the 3, 5, because we have the 25.3, the 46.3 on the right side, and then on the left side we have the 10.5 and the 15.5. So it's the 0.3 and the 0.5 make the 3, 5 profile.
Yeah, and that's right. A lot of this does get read from, opposite. You read it like the Torah, essentially,
Yeah.
from right to left. And so it gives you a profile, it gives you all these things. You just notice the sun and the earth are always in opposition, so they always have the same decimal point.
Yeah.
In case you're wondering, that never changes. The sun and the earth always have the same decimal point.
Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying. And then we're going to explain fixed lines. So lines express in a duality. It's the this and the that, or the this or not. And so sometimes on the chart, you can see like sometimes there's an up triangle or a down triangle, and sometimes there's a star, and you're like, what does that mean? And so the up triangle is exalted, quote, quote. And so this Ra pulled this language from astrology. And I know even he was a little like, because exalted, and the flip of the down triangle is detriment. So it sounds like one's good and one's bad. It's not that one's good and one's bad. One might look better and look easier, but they're both really important. So it's like, if you have the down triangles, like, don't feel bad. It's nothing bad about your chart. It's just fixed in that expression. So for the example of my chart, if you look at my Mercury, so if you look on the left side, on the right, that top one that's circled, it's 10.6, and it's fixed in the detriment. And so 10.6 is the hypocrite. And I find it kind of funny because my body, right? So the red, the unconscious, my body is programmed to communicate, Mercury's communication, where I'm a hypocrite and where I've messed stuff up. And it makes so much sense because it's like, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm saying that I already did it wrong, and I can tell you why it's wrong. And I can tell you why what I did is wrong. So even though it's like, it's the hypocrite and it's fixed in detriment, it can sound bad. It's like, oh no, this is just what I'm here to communicate is I already messed that up and it doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you all about it. I'm going to tell you how I'm a hypocrite.
Right. I get that.
Yeah. So you can have exalted or detriment. So if you look those up, Human Design, the definitive book, it's your Encyclopedia Britannica, basically. If you look those up in the back, you can look up where there's the fixed triangle up, the fixed triangle down. And then sometimes you'll see a star by those instead of a triangle. And so that means it's fixed as both. And it's basically, it's a special emphasis of like, hey, this is going to be a relevant theme in your life.
Yeah, and you know what? I've started recently giving it the language of just the first and second expressions. Because as I wake up more to my nature, love your detriments, love your exaltations, and most of them don't have either. So it's just sitting there as a regular gate working along. And the real important thing to notice is that we're a duality. We move back and forth. Even if it's exalted, you're still going to do some movement back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you come to know things, as you move away and then back. So they're just different expressions.
Yeah, exactly. Just enjoy it. Don't overthink it. Don't feel bad. There's nothing bad about your chart. Don't wish you had someone else's chart. And we all go through that. Like,
Did
that's
we
just
do that?
absolutely
I
normal.
did that.
We
I
all
did
do
that.
it. You totally do.
Yeah.
You're like, I wish I had this. Oh,
I wish I had.
had
I wish I
this.
had.
Yeah. And the longer you go through, like, I just started my 7th year in this, the longer you go through that deconditioning process, the more you do enjoy. You're like, oh, I'm glad I have this. Oh, and I get to experience this. Like, you do start to love your chart more. So, allow yourself that grace. And I totally understand what it is. But like, man, that's really annoying that I have to deal with this. And like, yeah, but you'll learn to love it as you go.
Yeah, absolutely will. And you'll also find the humor. It's
Oh,
funny.
yeah.
It's funny. It's funny
Absolutely.
AF. Funny AF, baby.
Then incarnation cross, just as like a brief little, how do you see this in a chart? So the incarnation cross, we're going to go back to that sun and the earth on both sides. So it's the circle with the dot and the circle with the cross in it in both sides. And you're again going to read it from the right to the left, from the black to the red, and the personality, then the design. So in this chart, on the right side, we have the 25 and the 46 in black. And then on the left side, we have the 10 and the 15. So the 25, 46, 10, 15 is a vessel of love. So that's how you can identify what your incarnation cross is.
They're always comprised of 4 separate gates. They're never the same gates. There has to be 4 separate ones in case you get confused at what you're looking at for whatever reason. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and there's a future episode where we're deep diving into incarnation crosses. But for now, it's just to kind of point at things in a chart so you just don't feel overwhelmed. Like, you can totally break this down and it'll be all right. So the incarnation crosses, the other thing you'll often see is the RAX, JUX, LAX. And you're like, what does this mean? And so RAX means right angle cross. And so the profile lines, as you're reading them from the personality and to the design, the right and the left, the first one, as it goes through this journey, because there's 12 of them, is the 1-3. And then that kind of like step stairs its way of the 1-3 to the 1-4, to the 2-4, to the 2-5, to the 3-5, to the 3-6, to the 4-6. Those are all right angle crosses. And that's
Create the ladder. It creates a
Ladder.
ladder. It looks like a Jacob's ladder. It
Yeah,
creates a ladder. It's inching back and forth, just like you'd expect our genome to do, just
yeah.
like you see it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the right angle cross people, they're here to have more of like a personal or even like a quote, quote, self-involved kind of life experience. It's nothing bad. They're just a little bit more focused into their own world. So that's the right angle cross. And
Only
then
one juxtaposition, right?
yeah, there's only one juxtaposition. So JUX means juxtaposition, and it's when you hit the 4-1. So if someone has a 4-1 profile, they're a juxtaposition cross and they're very fixed. You can imagine these people are like on their train tracks and they are going where they're going. And maybe it's right for you to jump on that train, but either way, they're going down that rail.
Very fixedness is important because it helps keep together the two sides of left angle and right angle.
Yeah, it's like this glue in the middle that's just like holding it together on either side and going down its
It's
own
the
path.
knuckle. It's like the knuckle in between the two joints. Yeah.
That's cool. And then finally, you'll see LAX or left angle cross. And so this is the 5-1, the 5-2, the 6-2, or the 6-3. And these are interpersonal experiences. So these people, their life is here to kind of involve more other people and have an effect on other people.
Yeah, it becomes, it's the keynote for it in the book is transpersonal. It's there to see out transpersonally across. If if you're a right angle person, wherever that incarnation cross is, you're going to find you're focused in on yourself. That's at the gate. You're focused in on what is that gate for you, and you'll see when we read for you. When you get all the way over to the left angle, you're focused across the channel and ultimately across all the circuitry. What's out there for me in them? What's that all about? So the left angle is dealing with the karma that the right angle lives into the world. The right angle moves through the juxtaposition to interchange itself with the left angle. The left angle comes right back and says, I got you. It's a dance. It's a square dance in a way.
That's fun. I love having you to give a little poetic,
Aw,
expression.
I,
No, I do. I
I don't
do.
even know I do it, is the
I know,
thing.
but that's why we work so well together.
Oh, thank you, Monty.
Thank you, Danny. So
Oh,
it's
no
just like
shit.
that's just a quick breakdown on the right angle juxtaposition, left angle crosses. Because again, I know what it's like to first see your chart and you're like, what is going on? And you can feel so overwhelmed that you don't even want to look at it. And it's just like, just take it in little bites and pieces. And you don't necessarily have to learn all of it. Like if you feel called to, dive in. But honestly, it's like you could learn just a couple things about your chart and you can get a lot out of it. And then if you want to dive in, then dive in with us. We're going to be teaching you every week.
Absolutely, every week. I got a lot of years left to live, so there's about 1 million readings left in me. So
Yeah, same.
jump
So,
on.
so then brief little explanation on the arrows that you can see in the chart. So these are called variables. So variables, or I'll call them the arrows as well. Again, we have a future deep dive on it, but just as a brief explanation, you can see either a left arrow or a right arrow. And then depending on where it is on the left top bottom or the right top or bottom determines the expression. And so the left top arrow would be like an active brain, right? It's always churning and chugging and it needs food to process it, basically. And then if you're looking at the left bottom arrow, if that's left, and then that would be a busy body, right? That would be an observed body that is active and constantly moving. Then if you go to the right, the personality, the black side of things, if the top right arrow is facing left, then that's a strategic mind. And it's very focused and just pulling things apart in a mental way. And then the bottom right arrow, if it's facing left, it would be a focused kind of view. Do you have anything to say on the left arrow
Well,
broadly?
no, just the strategic act, the active, strategic, narrowed principle. Strategery demands you're narrowing something about your view, your mental process, how you're thinking, your movement, your purpose of it all. And it's sort of putting stuff together. Strategery is about maybe I can get some of this out of some of that with some of this, which is the opposite of what you're about to read.
Yeah. So then going into the right arrow, then depending on its location. So again, we're going to now be reading this from the left to the right, the black or the red to the black. So if the top left
I still read
arrow,
it. I still read right to left here too, just so you know, always.
See, and I don't, because I always go through the PHS way.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that's just me. So
Yep.
if you're looking at the top left arrow, and if it's facing right, then it is a passive quote brain. So that's a brain it's not like the left brain is always like churning through and it like needs constant food. The right brain is more chill and just receiving, and it's more passive. And so like those are people that would do better with like fasting and stuff like that. So just kind of an interesting little side note. Then if you go down to the bottom left arrow, if that's facing right, it's an observer body. It's more of a chill body. It's not running around like crazy. It's more chill and observing outwards. Then if you flip over to the black side, the personality side, that top arrow, if it's facing right, it's a receptive mind. As opposed to strategic, it's receptive and it's taking it in and it's just receiving by being. And then the bottom right arrow, if that's facing right, then it's a peripheral and a wide view.
In the 17 or almost 18 years now that I've been doing this, I have noticed, and others hopefully can corroborate this, Ra always said, we're moving to the right, just period. And so when I first started, it was straight up 50-50, you know what I mean? 50-50 between right and left. And now it's not. It's a little more weighted to the right, so it seems. But I'd love other people to check their chart. Check if you pulled 20 charts in the last year of yourself, check them and just come up with an average of right and left arrows. Where is that? But we're moving to the right because that open and receptivity is this magic place. But that movement isn't it doesn't mean we're getting rid of the other thing necessarily. It's just there's a slight movement to it. It's going to be weighted more towards that. Just like we don't need as many manifestors. Sooner or later, we won't need necessarily everyone to be strategic because the old seven-centered way was strictly strategic. All arrows pointed left, and then you lose some of your humanity if you're not open. Receptivity is the compassion is in there. You know, I mean, a lot of our openness to God's grace and glory is very openness to it. It's very much inside of rightness, wherever it be in the world or in your body graph. Even if you don't have any rightness in your body graph, you got rightness. You live in a world of it, and every single gate has a variable. We only list the top two. Every gate.
That's
So
fun.
go down to
Oh
go down
yeah.
to Pluto. You go down to Pluto, you got either a right or a left. It's one or the other. There's a tone and a base and everything to every single gate. So your body graph is loaded with arrows. We just don't show them because it's too much.
Yeah, it get too confusing. But like I said, we're doing a future episode on this, so don't get too tangled up trying to understand it. I just wanted to do a brief overview of like what do these arrows mean, because it could just be confusing. So that's like the brief little overview on the variable arrows. And then
Perfect.
now we're going to flip over to the mandala view of
Mooney, can you handle this for a moment?
I can handle this.
I
Yeah.
have a little thing I have to.
Yeah, go handle. I will pop Danny off. So sometimes when you're looking at the body graph chart, you'll have that regular one that we were just looking at, but sometimes you get this mandala view, which is like the pretty big circle view, but it also can be like even more overwhelming because like what is going on? Now it's in a circle. Now there's all sorts of glyphs. So again, we're just going to break this down simply into the sum of its parts. So if we just kind of black out the outer layers of it, this is just the same chart we've been looking at. This is the same exact body graph. It just doesn't have the numbers on the sides. It's just the zoom in of the body graph. And then if we take it out one layer, then now we can see the planetary symbols. So the planetary symbols that we just went over, now you can just see where they exist on that 360-degree wheel. And then further moving out another layer, now you can see the zodiac symbols. And this is just the astrological location, again, within the sky, within that 360 view. Now you can just see both the astrological symbols of the different signs. And then you can see where the planets lie within those signs, which is kind of fun to dive into. And then if we zoom out one layer further, now you can see these 64 gates. So these are the same 64 gates of the I Ching, the same 64 gates that are on all these centers. But now we can see how they move through in like a chronological way around. If you're looking at the sun and the earth, you can see where the sun is moving for the year around the wheel by seeing these 64 gates. And then if we zoom out one layer further, now we can see the hexagrams of the I Ching. So the hexagrams, they're those 6 lines that are either solid or broken. And that's another thing. We're going to be deep diving into the I Ching, into the trigrams, into the hexagrams. We're going to see all of that good stuff. We're going to dive in deeper. But here's just to, again, break down the mandala chart, because, again, I know how confusing it can be to see all of these shapes and numbers and colors. So I just wanted to point it out. This is what it means. And if you just break it down into the sum of its parts, it's not as confusing. And so, yeah, that's how to read a human design chart. That's when, you know, we pointed at all the little different parts of it. And you can obviously go way deeper, and there's lots of interpretation to learn. But this, we just wanted to explain the sum of the parts, what they mean, where you can find this stuff, and just make it a little easier and more digestible, because it can be really confusing initially with seeing all of it and not knowing what to do with it. And I think we have Danny back.
Appreciate that.
Hi. Yeah, I just went through the different layers of the body graph, then the planets, the zodiac, the 64 gates, and the hexagrams. And so now you came back.
For like 4 minutes, and I missed all that. I love it.
I was just explaining like what they are. I wasn't going into huge depth, but I wanted to make it less confusing and more digestible for people to not get overwhelmed.
Everyone will see this is simple enough stuff. It just looks complicated. There's 64 things. They got names. We say a bunch of stuff, and now you know your design. See?
Yeah. That's it.
See, that's it. It's all set. Easy.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, Danny?
Not that I can really think of. It's the interplay of the hexagrams with the astrological signs. That was so much magic that came into all of this. And I do adore going over that. And yes, astrology helps beef up part of how you'll read a body graph. It's, you know, there's a certain amount of astrology you can read into this. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I like it too, because it's the locations. It's the locations of the planets within the sky without getting like lost in, I don't know, the ritual or the idolization that can kind of come with astrology, like it gets really confusing as now you're like looking at angles and triangles and stuff like that. And it always I would get lost on it. Whereas like human design, I feel like it just takes all of it, synthesizes it, and makes it a lot more simple and direct. And it makes it more tangible, and I could really do a lot more with human design than with like straight astrology personally.
Is the slideshow part over?
Yeah, pretty much.
Can we go full screen?
Yeah, I just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you to all our viewers, both live and on the replay. I really appreciate you guys, because this is really fun. So it means a lot that you guys are hanging out and liking, subscribing, and commenting. It always makes me really happy. So thanks.
Absolutely. The last thing I was going to say, and I don't need the image up there for it, is just the fact that thousands of years ago, when they were coming up with these values for astrology and recognizing, hey, think of what they recognized. And how did they intuit this? It's just so stunning. They recognize that we seem to be affected depending on what planets are in the foreground relative to what constellations are in the background. When we get into the neutrino, and I think we've already gone over what the neutrino is, they were just, in a nutshell, they were recognizing the influence of the neutrino that pours in and becomes affected slightly by the planet it pours through before it reaches us. And as we're being minted like a coin at birth. Mm-hmm. They were recognizing that and were able to put it into a form of words, something that later we scientifically said, oh yeah, yep, yep, that's right. Basically, yep, you got it. And pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's human design continually amazes me, and I love going deeper and like understanding it and really breaking it all down, because it's like there's something really beautiful. And again, like it's so intricate. Like it's definitely brought me closer to the divine. It's brought me closer to God, because I can see how intricate and precise it is. And it's like, oh, it's not a mistake. Like I'm not a mistake. You're not a mistake. None of our viewers are mistakes. Like this is all so purposeful. Like if there's a program, there's a programmer. Like something,
Yes, yes.
whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, the
No,
divine,
God,
the Big
God's
Bang, whatever you want to call
sure.
it, whatever works for you, like something created us, something loves us enough to create us in such a beautiful and intricate way. Like it really just like causes pause and appreciation and gratitude and just that like awareness of like, it's not a mistake. You're not a mistake. This is all really precise and divine and beautiful. And I just feel so lucky we get to peer behind the curtain and get any glimpse of it. And it just offers so much context and solace. You know, when things are going weird, I can look at like what's going on with the human design, what's going on with the transits, and I can go, oh, okay, it's a little weird because some energy is going around, but it's going to be okay. You know,
Just think of what we could say just in the world generally with the fact that we came into 36 and 6. I mean, so much gets revealed by all of it is the thing. And yeah, God really knocked it out of the park with this one. Is like, here's a self-replicating, self-working design. And when you guys have enough words and a little bit of science language, I'll show it to you so you can like, so you can not covet it and try and make everyone else not have it while you have it. You know, I mean, when the world is ready, when we're intelligent enough, which is now, we're already becoming the 100th monkey on all of that. So,
and how do you you work with the design? I just think that's really beautiful. Like you were designed in a specific and beautiful, precise way. I was designed in a beautiful and specific and precise way. And how do I work with it? You know, I like to think of human design chart as like how a cardiologist would look at the circulatory system. It's like, this is the way it moves. It moves from the heart, you know, through the arteries, blood moves around, and then it comes back through the veins to get like recirculated. Like that's how it works. If you try to go the other way, you're going to have a bad time. Like if you try to go the opposite direction in which the blood moves or any part of your body and how it's supposed to work, you're going to have a weird bad time. And it's really cool with human design because it's the energetics and it's giving understanding to the intangible. It's a scientific exploration of something that is intangible, but also real. And if you can learn to work within your design as an individual, as a couple, as a group, as a family, whatever combinations, you can just flow. You can work with the flow of the universe. You can work with the nature of the universe. And I just think that's really, really neat and really pretty.
It really is. And go figure, we needed it to become a science to finally be able to do that with predictable regularity and reproducible results every time. So
absolutely. So I
I'm
feel
good.
really good. Yeah, I feel good. Thank you for everyone hanging out. And thank you for everyone watching on the replay and for engaging on the YouTube. It's really fun and awesome having you guys on there. And so next week, we're going to be diving into tribal circuitry. We're going to go through both the defense and the ego side. We're going to go through the entire tribal circuitry. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. And yeah, moving forward, our shows are going to be a half hour earlier. So instead of 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, it'll be 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, was that 5 Pacific. So catch us then or catch us on the replay and have a great week. And we'll see you next time.
Catch you next time, everyone.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.